Jungkook collapses in the middle of dance practice after witnessing a shocking kiss between Jimin and Taehyung. What secrets threaten to shatter them? Don't turn around, Jungkook. But the voice came too late. The crack of a mirror shattering sliced through the rehearsal room like lightning, louder, somehow, than the bass-heavy tracks still thumping through the speakers. Shards of glass rained onto the polished floor, some catching the neon studio lights like deadly fragments of starlight. Jungkook stood frozen in the middle of Studio 3, his chest heaving, one hand clutching the side of his head as if the sound had ruptured something deep inside. Time had slowed, or maybe it had simply stopped. In the fractured reflection of the shattered mirror, Jungkook saw it again, Jimin, pressed against the wall, his lips on Taehyung's. Not playful. Not teasing. Desperate. Real. A secret not meant for his eyes. Then came the silence, suffocating in its finality. Jungkook's vision tunneled. His breath caught in his throat, air thinning around him like a collapsing lung. He stumbled back, the floor rising to meet him. And everything went black. The room erupted into motion. Hoseok lunged forward, his scream muted under the blaring silence. Namjoon's water bottle clattered across the floor, forgotten. Yoongi cursed under his breath and knelt beside Jungkook, 2 fingers pressed against the side of his neck. He fainted, he muttered. Pulses fast. Jimin didn't move. His back was still against the wall, mouth parted, eyes wide with guilt so raw it cut through the haze like acid. Taehyung, expression unreadable, stepped forward, but Seokjin raised a hand, stopping him cold. Not now, Jin said, voice steel. The next few minutes blurred into chaos. Staff rushed in. The music was cut. The mirrors were taped off, blood checked for. Jungkook was lifted carefully, and taken into the green room where the cold smell of antiseptic and leather couches dulled the air. A medic pressed ice to his temple. The others hovered, shadows with pounding hearts. But Jimin didn't follow. He stood alone in Studio 3 long after they were gone, staring at the jagged edge of the broken glass, his reflection fragmented and hollow. He had promised himself never to let this happen. Never to let what they were bleed into what they did. Not in this world. Not in this group. Not when everything was already hanging by a thread. But Taehyung had kissed him first. And he hadn't stopped it. Meanwhile, in the green room, Jungkook began to stir. His brows twitched, breath shallow as if surfacing from a nightmare. The medic spoke gently to him, but he didn't seem to hear. Instead, he sat up slowly, eyes unfocused. A single word formed on his lips, hoarse, broken. Why? No one answered. No one could. Even if they'd heard, what words could explain betrayal that felt like being carved open from the inside? Jungkook's memories came in waves. The way Jimin had been distant for weeks. How Taehyung had started avoiding him at night. The soft murmurs between them after practice, laughter too quiet to be shared. A secret that had finally unraveled, not through confession but in the worst way possible, witnessed. Namjoon came in, concern carved deep into his usually calm face. Kook, don't overthink this, okay? It's not, it's complicated. No, Jungkook cut him off. It's not. There was no room in him for nuance. Not yet. He still felt the heat of that kiss burning behind his eyes, still smelled the sweat of their bodies tangled after hours of dancing together, bodies that had betrayed him. Outside the practice building, rain began to fall in fine, cutting lines, streaking down the glass like tears. In the dim light, it looked almost like the mirror inside fractured, weeping. Back in Studio 3, Jimin finally moved. He stepped toward the broken mirror, his reflection shifting with every step. He stared at himself and at the ghost of Taehyung beside him. He knew what he had to do. He would end it. Not the group. Not the music. But the part of himself that had thought, even for a second, that he could have both love and loyalty and come out clean. He wiped his eyes roughly, jaw tightening. This was only the beginning. You think I don't see the way you look at him? The accusation burst out like a thunderclap, thick with venom and disbelief. The dressing room, usually a place of laughter and casual chaos, had become a cage humming with tension. Taehyung stood by the locker, his hands clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. Jimin faced him from across the room, his back to the door as if bracing against the world outside. That's not what this is about, Jimin said, his voice low but trembling. Don't twist this. Then tell me, Taehyung spat, stepping forward. What the hell was that yesterday? Was I a mistake? A distraction? A rebound? Jimin flinched as if struck. His mouth opened, then closed again. He shook his head, once slowly. You kissed me, Tae, he said finally. You knew what it meant. And you kissed me back, Taehyung shot back. Don't forget that. Outside the dressing room, silence reigned in the hallway, but it was a silence that crackled with electricity. The rest of the group knew better than to intervene yet, except for Jungkook, who hadn't shown up since the incident. He hadn't answered calls. His phone was off. His room was empty. That absence loomed over all of them, a shadow that stretched longer by the hour. Inside, Jimin backed into the vanity table, his reflection fractured in the surrounding lights. I didn't plan for this, he said. I didn't want it to happen this way. Jungkook saw something he shouldn't have. He's hurt. He's not the only one, Taehyung whispered, voice breaking. You think I haven't noticed how you change when he's around? How you freeze when he touches you? How your eyes follow him even when you're with me? Stop, Jimin hissed. No. You owe me this. Jimin exhaled, slow and ragged. I was trying to protect what we have. Taehyung laughed bitterly. Protect it? By hiding it? By pretending it didn't happen? By kissing me like I meant everything and then acting like it meant nothing? A moment of silence passed, sharp as a knife's edge. Then Jimin said it wasn't nothing. You know that. Do I? Neither of them moved. Across town, in a dim apartment high above the city, Jungkook stood in front of the window, unmoving. The skyline blinked in silence. The air smelled like rain and cold iron. His phone buzzed again and again on the kitchen counter behind him. Jeon, Hobi, Namjoon, even Junggi. Messages stacked like unopened wounds. But he didn't answer. His mind kept replaying the image. The kiss. The hands. The raw closeness. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was betrayal because Jimin had told him everything. Because Taehyung had once said, "You're my brother first, before anything else." And yet, there they were. He pressed his forehead to the cool glass, his breath fogging up the window in slow, shallow bursts. Then a knock. Soft at first, then urgent. He turned, uncertain. The door handle rattled. Jungkook? It's me. Yoongi. Still silent, Jungkook walked slowly to the door. He unlocked it without speaking. Yoongi stepped inside, eyes narrowing as he took in the dark, unlit apartment. You look like hell, he muttered. Feel like it, Jungkook said, voice dry. You can't keep hiding. Not hiding, Jungkook replied. Just done. Yoongi didn't react. Instead, he walked over to the kitchen, opened a cabinet, and poured a glass of water. He set it down on the table. You're not done, he said. You're scared. And hurt. And angry. But you're not done. Jungkook finally met his gaze. They lied to me. They didn't lie, Yoongi said. They just didn't tell you. That's worse. Yoongi's silence stretched. You're right, he said eventually. It is worse. That quiet admission made Jungkook's throat tighten. He dropped onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. I loved him, he whispered. I don't even know when it happened. It was just always there. Yoongi sat beside him. Love's not always clean, Kook. Sometimes it crawls into the cracks and makes a home. And sometimes it shatters you. Back at the rehearsal building, Namjoon was pacing like a man on the edge. His mind was a hurricane, contract clauses, press appearances, fan speculation, and now this. I can't cover this up, he muttered. If this leaks, we're done. Seokjin watched him, arms crossed. Then we keep it from leaking. That's not how this works, Namjoon snapped. This isn't 2015. Phones are everywhere. Fans are sharks. One whisper, one blurry picture, and we're front page scandal. You think I don't know that? Jeon said. But they're not enemies. They're brothers who got caught in a storm. And Jungkook, he's drowning. Namjoon stopped. He ran a hand through his hair, the leader mask cracking. I don't know how to fix this. No one does, Jeon said quietly. So stop trying to fix. Start listening. And so, for the first time in hours, Namjoon sat down. Back in the dressing room, Jimin had fallen quiet. His hands were trembling now. I didn't mean to hurt him, he whispered. I didn't even realize I could. Taehyung stood motionless, then approached slowly. Do you love him? He asked, softly. Jimin blinked. What? Do you love Jungkook? The question tore through the room like fire. Jimin swallowed hard. His lips parted, but no words came out. And in that silence, Taehyung already had his answer. I hope you figure it out, he said, and walked out without looking back. When the door closed, Jimin sank to the floor. Later that night, the seven of them gathered again. Not at a studio. Not under management. At Jin's apartment. No staff. No lights. Just them. The silence as Jungkook walked in was suffocating. Everyone stood. No one spoke. Then Jungkook turned to Jimin. Tell me the truth, he said. Just this once. Were you ever going to tell me? Jimin stared at him. He looked 10 years older. I wanted to, he said. But I was afraid. Of what? Of losing you. You already did. The words hit like a slap. Jimin's eyes filled. I'm sorry. Jungkook looked at him for a long time. I know. But sorry wasn't enough. Not yet. Maybe not ever. They sat in a circle that night. No one slept. Stories poured out. Wounds opened. Secrets confessed. Rage burned. Tears fell. They talked until dawn. And by morning, nothing had been fixed. But everything had been said. Tell me you didn't mean it. Jimin's voice cracked in the middle of the silent hallway, echoing off the white walls of the dorm like a wound that wouldn't clot. His feet were bare. His eyes were rimmed red. The light above flickered softly, a pulsing heartbeat that matched the ache in his chest. Across from him, Jungkook stood rigid, his jaw clenched so tight it made the muscles twitch. The shadows under his eyes were darker now. The softness that once made his gaze feel like home was gone. I meant every word, Jungkook said. Every single one. You said I already lost you. You did. But Jimin took a step forward, helpless. You don't understand, No, Jungkook cut him off. You don't. You don't get to decide how I feel. You don't get to break something, then tell me how to bleed. The air between them burned. From the other end of the hallway, Taehyung appeared, frozen mid-step as he registered the storm unraveling in front of him. He didn't move. Neither of them acknowledged him, though both knew he was there. You think I wanted this? Jimin's voice rose now, choked and angry. You think I planned for this chaos, for you to see that, like that? You think I didn't die the second I saw your face? Then why? Jungkook's voice shattered. Why didn't you stop? Jimin couldn't answer. Because it had felt like the last moment of oxygen in a room collapsing on itself. Because Taehyung had kissed him like they had no tomorrow. Because in that moment, something inside Jimin had begged to feel wanted, needed, even if it was wrong. And Jungkook had seen everything. I didn't stop because I forgot everything else, Jimin said softly. For just a second. I forgot the cameras, the band, the world. Even you. The silence that followed was unbearable. Then finally Jungkook said, then you really did lose me. And he walked away. Taehyung didn't move until Jimin turned, eyes meeting his like a dagger between them. You heard everything, Jimin said. It wasn't a question. I did. I guess you're happy now. No, Taehyung stepped closer. This was never about winning. Jimin laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Wasn't it? He pushed past Taehyung, disappearing down the hallway, leaving behind only his scent, soap and sweat and sorrow and the ghost of something broken. In the dorm's living room, the rest of the members sat in a taut, loaded silence. Jeon nursed a cold mug of coffee. Hoseok had his face buried in his hands. Junggi sat on the floor, headphones around his neck, eyes blank as an unfinished verse. I think we need help, Namjoon said finally. His voice was barely above a whisper. You mean a therapist? Jeon asked. No, Namjoon replied. I mean all of us. Group therapy. Mediation. Something. Junggi scoffed. You really think a stranger's gonna untangle this mess? Do you have a better idea? The room fell silent again. Meanwhile, Jimin locked himself in the recording booth. His hands shook as he loaded the track. He turned off the lights, letting the red glow of the soundboard illuminate his face. He wanted to scream. To tear apart his own voice. To find something inside himself that still resembled the boy who loved music more than secrets. He pressed record. The first note he sang cracked. He stopped. Tried again. This time his voice held, but it trembled. He sang not like someone chasing a melody, but like someone running from ghosts. Every lyric was a confession he couldn't say aloud. Every harmony was a plea Jungkook would never hear. Outside the booth, Taehyung stood quietly, listening through the monitor, hands clenched in his hoodie pockets. He closed his eyes. Elsewhere, Jungkook was driving. Fast. Too fast. The rain had returned, slicking the roads and distorting the lights of the city into streaks of orange and blue. He didn't know where he was going, he just knew he had to move. His phone buzzed again. Messages from fans, staff, and worse, Jimin. He tossed it into the backseat. He pulled over in front of an old boxing gym. One they used to train in during the early days. No cameras. No reporters. Just the echo of fists against leather and pain that made sense. Inside, the gym was nearly empty. Just a single man behind the counter nodding in recognition. Jungkook didn't speak. He just walked to the back, stripped off his hoodie, wrapped his fists in tape, and stepped into the ring. The first punch he threw hurt. The second numbed it. By the 10th, his knuckles were bleeding. Still, he kept hitting the bag. Again and again. Sweat poured off him, mixing with blood. His vision blurred, but not from exertion, from memory. From the image of Jimin's lips on Taehyung's. From the months of subtle lies. From the aching truth that he wasn't enough. And then a voice behind him. You'll break something. He turned. Junggi stood there, arms crossed, a towel in one hand. His expression unreadable. Good, Jungkook panted. No, Junggi said, stepping forward. Not good. You think pain's gonna make this go away? No, Jungkook said, wiping his mouth. But it's the only thing that doesn't lie. Junggi tossed him the towel. Lying to yourself doesn't make it truth. Jungkook sat on the edge of the ring. His hands trembled. Blood stained the white wraps. I loved him, Hyung. I know. I think I still do. I know. Back at the dorm, Taehyung sat on the rooftop, legs dangling over the edge. The city below glittered, indifferent to heartbreak. Jimin joined him, wrapped in a coat 2 sizes too big. They sat in silence for a long time. Did you ever mean it? Jimin asked finally. The kiss? Taehyung didn't look at him. Every second. I don't know if I can love you. Taehyung's smile was tired. I never asked you to. Jimin looked down at his hands. But I wanted to. They didn't touch. Didn't cry. Just sat under the stars like 2 boys who had broken something they didn't know how to fix. Inside, Namjoon had called a meeting. He stood, phone in hand, voice firm. We've got 3 days before the next public appearance. I don't care what it takes, we fix this. Or we fall. They all looked at each other. Jin nodded slowly. Hoseok wiped his eyes. Yoongi walked in with Jungkook behind him, blood wiped clean but eyes still red. We talk tonight, Namjoon said. All of us. No music. No staff. No cameras. Just truth. The members sat in a circle again. No one wanted to speak first. Then Jungkook said, I still love you, Jimin. Everyone froze. Jimin's lip trembled. I don't deserve that. I know. But I never stopped loving you either. Yoongi looked away. Taehyung closed his eyes. Namjoon exhaled. The circle sat unbroken but frayed. There were no hugs. No forgiveness. Just 7 boys and the mess they made. And the long road ahead to clean it. You're a coward. Jungkook's voice struck like a whip in the darkened practice room, his breath fogging in the cold air. The room was silent but pulsing with unresolved tension like a sealed pressure chamber on the verge of detonation. Opposite him, Taehyung stood tall, rigid, lips pressed into a thin line, but his eyes, always his eyes, betrayed the storm beneath. You're angry. Say that. Don't hide behind names, Taehyung said calmly, though the veins in his neck betrayed the restraint in his tone. I'm not hiding, Jungkook snapped, stepping forward, sweat dripping from his brow. I'm standing right here. You're the one who hid. Behind kisses. Behind secrecy. Behind him. I never hid, Taehyung said, voice rising. You just never wanted to look. Jungkook laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. Right? I just didn't see it. The way you stared at him when you thought no one noticed. The late nights, the excuses, the looks. You think I didn't see it coming? I did. I just didn't want to believe it. The air was thick with heat, despite the cold room. One of the overhead lights buzzed and flickered. You and Jimin were never just friends, Jungkook said. I thought I could live with that. I thought I could trust you both enough to believe it was innocent. It was, Taehyung said, but even as the word left his lips, his face crumpled slightly. At first. Until it wasn't, Jungkook finished for him. Taehyung looked away, jaw tightening. You kissed him, Jungkook said, softer now, quieter but no less venomous. And he let you. I loved him, Taehyung said. Did? Jungkook echoed, eyes narrowing. Or do? Taehyung didn't answer. Outside the studio, the rest of the members were gathered in the hallway listening. Jimin sat alone on the floor, back against the wall, legs drawn up to his chest, his face buried in his arms. Jin stood next to Hoseok, tense and silent, while Yoongi leaned against the wall, chewing the inside of his cheek. Namjoon paced back and forth, running one hand through his hair every few seconds. We should stop this, Hoseok whispered. No, Namjoon said firmly. They need this. Inside, Taehyung finally looked Jungkook in the eye. Yes. I love him. I never stopped. There it was. The final blow. Jungkook took a step back, blinking rapidly, his throat working hard to swallow the scream he wanted to let out. Then why the hell did you come here? He asked. Because I also love you, Taehyung said. Not in the way you think. Not romantically. But like family. Like something I never wanted to break. Then why did you? I was weak, Taehyung said. I thought I could keep both. The friendship. The feeling. The music. But it doesn't work like that. Not in here. He tapped his chest. Jungkook stared at him for a long time. Then turned to leave. Taehyung's voice stopped him. You don't hate me. Jungkook turned back, eyes blazing. I wish I did, he said. Then he left. Hours later, the dorm was cold, filled with uneven breathing and unsaid things. Dinner had been left untouched on the table. The kitchen light buzzed overhead, casting long shadows over the counter. Jimin was in his room, lights off, phone face down beside him. His thumb hovered over Jungkook's name in his contacts, but he couldn't bring himself to press it. Every message he drafted in the past 3 days remained unsent. He turned onto his back and stared at the ceiling. His door opened softly. Can I come in? It was Hoseok. Jimin nodded in the dark. Hoseok sat beside him on the edge of the bed. For a long time, neither of them spoke. I saw the way you looked at him, Hoseok said eventually. Who? Jimin whispered even though he already knew. Jungkook. Jimin's lips parted. He turned his head toward the window. I was scared, he admitted. Of what? That if I let myself love him out loud, everything would fall apart. The group. The balance. Our lives. And now? Jimin let out a shaky breath. Now I've already destroyed it. Might as well have done it honestly. Hoseok didn't reply. Instead, he placed a hand on Jimin's shoulder. Do you love him? Yes. Do you love Taehyung? Jimin hesitated. In a different way. That's not an answer. Jimin finally met Hoseok's gaze. I think. I tried to love Taehyung to protect myself from what I felt for Jungkook. Hoseok's expression didn't change. And now? Now I've broken both. Down the hall, Jungkook stood in front of the mirror, hands gripping the sink. He stared at his reflection, sweat clinging to his temples, eyes red-rimmed but dry. He hadn't cried since that night. Not when Jimin admitted his feelings. Not when Taehyung confessed. Not even when Junggi tried to hold him and he pulled away like a ghost slipping through hands. But now, looking at himself, the youngest, the golden magne, the strong one, he felt something inside him fracture. He whispered, I don't know who I am anymore. Behind him, Junggi appeared in the doorway. He didn't speak. He just walked forward and rested his hand on Jungkook's shoulder. Jungkook didn't move. Do you want to scream? Junggi asked quietly. Jungkook nodded. Then scream. Jungkook looked up, met his Hyung's eyes, and let out a sound that had no words. It wasn't a scream. It was a soul unraveling. Junggi didn't let go. Back in the common room, Namjoon gathered them all. 7 boys. 7 ghosts. 7 pieces of something sacred shattered on the floor. We talk now, he said. No cameras. No fans. Just us. If we don't, we won't survive this. They formed a circle. Jimin beside Hoseok. Jungkook beside Junggi. Taehyung 2 seats away. Namjoon took a breath. We're not okay, he said. Let's start there. The words opened something. What followed was not structured. It wasn't clean. It was chaotic, painful, ugly. Jimin apologized again. Taehyung admitted he had dreamed of leaving once just to escape the guilt. Jungkook said he wanted to burn everything down some nights. Jeon wept quietly for the first time in years. Hoseok admitted he'd thought about quitting if things didn't change. Namjoon blamed himself. For not seeing it sooner. For not being strong enough. Junggi confessed he'd written a song no one would ever hear, a funeral for their friendship. But they kept talking. All night. Until the sky lightened outside the windows. Until voices grew hoarse. Until no one could hide. And when the sun finally rose, something unspoken had shifted. They were still broken. But they were together. And sometimes that was enough to begin again. I don't trust you anymore. Jungkook's words didn't explode into the room like they used to. They floated. Quiet. Controlled. Like the sharp edge of a scalpel, not the fury of a blade. And somehow that calm made it worse. Across from him, Jimin froze mid-step, halfway between the dorm entrance and the kitchen. A Tupperware of rice clattered from his hand and hit the floor, the lid popping open, the scent of garlic and sesame oil cutting the still air. Taehyung was seated at the dining table, phone in hand, his thumb pausing on the screen. Hoseok, who had been microwaving something, let the hum of the machine carry on behind him as he turned around. Jeon from the hallway didn't step in, but he lingered out of view, listening. Namjoon was in his room, writing again, trying not to hear anything but knowing he would hear everything. And Junggi, seated on the couch with his headphones off, closed his eyes. Jimin didn't pick up the rice. Didn't even move. He said, I know. The words were small, barely a breath, but they fractured something in Jungkook's chest. Because knowing wasn't enough. Because knowing didn't stitch back months of distrust, glances too long, and truths left to rot. Taehyung stood up. Jungkook turned to him. Don't. Not you. Taehyung stopped. His fists tightened. Why, he said, quiet. You know why. I didn't lie to you. No, Jungkook said. You just let me lie to myself. A pause. The microwave beeped behind Hoseok, a shrill, stupid reminder that the world continued moving even when hearts didn't. You think I wanted to hurt you? Taehyung said. You think I planned this? Do you know how many nights I sat awake trying to figure out how not to be in love with him? Jungkook's eyes flared. So you were in love with him? Fully. Not just affection. Not just confusion. Love? Yes, Taehyung said. I was. And you didn't care what it would do to me? I cared, Taehyung said. But I also mattered. Jimin flinched visibly. So that's what this is now? Jungkook asked, stepping closer. You justifying betrayal with self-worth? I'm not justifying it, Taehyung said, voice cracking. I'm owning it. Junggi stood. Enough. But Jungkook didn't stop. I thought we were brothers. We still are, Taehyung said. No, Jungkook shook his head. No, because brothers don't kiss what you hold sacred and call it a mistake. Jimin spoke for the first time. He didn't call it a mistake. Jungkook turned, and for a moment there was just that, the look. Between them, 1,000 unsaid things vibrating in the space between their bodies. I still love you, Jimin said. Even now. Then why does it feel like I died in your story? The question hit like fire in a dry room. No one moved. No one breathed. Junggi walked into the kitchen and poured water. He drank it. No one else moved. Because I couldn't live in mine, Jimin whispered. And that was worse than an excuse. That was the truth. You know what hurts? Jungkook said. It's not the kiss. It's not the secret. It's waking up every day and wondering if any of what we had was ever real. It was, Jimin said. I swear to God. You kissed him, Jungkook said, shaking his head. With the mouth you used to tell me you loved me. And you slept beside me with eyes full of doubt, Jimin snapped suddenly. Don't act like you didn't know something was wrong. Don't act like you weren't pulling away too. You wanted me to choose. You just didn't have the guts to say it. That's a lie, Jungkook said, voice barely human. It's not, Jimin said. You knew deep down. You saw it happening. You let it happen. And still, I was the one left alone, Jungkook said. Silence. Taehyung stepped away. Left the kitchen. Walked out the front door without looking back. The door didn't slam. That made it worse. The boys didn't eat dinner that night. The rice stayed on the floor until morning. Jeon found Jungkook hours later, curled up under the table in the old storage room where they kept the stage props no one wanted to see anymore. His hands were gripping the fabric of his hoodie. His eyes were red, not from crying, but from trying not to. I don't think I can perform with him again, Jungkook said. With Jimin? Jeon asked, crouching beside him. Jungkook shook his head. With either of them. I look at him and I see everything we lost. I look at Taehyung and I see everything he took. Jeon sat down fully, leaning his head back against the wall. You want the truth? He asked. No, Jungkook muttered. You're getting it anyway, Jeon said. You three are a storm. Always have been. Jimin and Taehyung are the spark. You're the flame. Put you together, and either we get fireworks or wildfire. Jungkook stayed silent. But you love them, Jeon said. That's the hardest part. Jungkook exhaled sharply. I hate that I do. You don't. You hate what they did. That's different. I don't think I can forgive them. You don't have to, Jeon said. But you have to choose whether you stay angry or whether you start healing. Later that week, during choreography practice, Jimin stepped into place behind Jungkook. A beat passed. 2. Then Jungkook stepped forward, breaking formation. The music stopped. Everyone froze. Jimin looked up. Jungkook turned to him, sweat dripping from his hairline, breathing heavy. I need space, he said. I'll give it, Jimin whispered. They didn't dance together for the rest of the session. The instructors didn't push it. The label didn't push it. But the fans noticed. The space between them in photo shoots. The lack of eye contact during interviews. The missing smiles during encore stages. It was a slow unraveling. Until one night, Jungkook posted a video at 3 a.m. No music. No filters. Just him. Looking into the camera. I'm not okay, he said. But I'm trying. And the internet broke. Not from scandal. But from silence finally speaking. Jimin reposted it with a single caption. I'm sorry. He deserved better. I'm trying too. Taehyung didn't post anything. He left the group chat. Namjoon found him a week later in a quiet cafe in Busan. No bodyguards. No manager. Just Taehyung. Wearing a cap low over his face. Sipping cold coffee. You running? Namjoon asked. No, Taehyung said. I'm breathing. Are you coming back? Taehyung didn't answer right away. He tapped the edge of the cup. If I come back, he said. What am I coming back to? Namjoon stared at him for a long time. Not forgiveness, he said. But maybe something better. Taehyung looked up. Maybe a beginning. And that was how the wound stayed open but stopped bleeding. For now. You're early. The sound of Taehyung's voice echoed in the rehearsal room. Low, flat, without any emotion to lean on. Jungkook turned slowly from the mirror, where he had been adjusting the straps of his black hoodie. He had come in before sunrise, hoping for solitude, for a space to breathe in the absence of questions, stares, or ghosts. But the ghost he was trying to outrun was already there, standing with one hand tucked into the pocket of his sweatpants, and the other gripping a water bottle like a lifeline. Jungkook said nothing at first. The tension sat thick between them, the air more humid from the weight of unfinished conversations than from the heat of practice. I thought you were in Jeju, Jungkook muttered eventually. Came back 2 days ago. You didn't tell anyone. Didn't think I was missed. The silence that followed made the mirrors feel like walls. I saw your video, Taehyung added, his voice quieter now. And Jimin's post. Jungkook looked away. That wasn't for you. I know, Taehyung said. That's why it hurt. He stepped forward, slow and cautious, as if he knew he might be walking into fire. Jungkook didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at the reflection of the two of them, distant, blurred by morning light. I'm not here to explain myself, Taehyung said. I've done enough damage. Then why are you here? Jungkook finally asked. Because there's still something I haven't said. And if I don't now, I never will. Jungkook waited. Taehyung took a breath. I loved Jimin, he said. I don't regret it. But I regret the way I loved him. Jungkook turned to face him fully, arms crossed, heart pounding. I regret loving him when I knew you were already breaking. I regret not choosing you, not in a romantic way but as my brother. I regret not sitting you down and telling you the truth before it was too late. I regret being a coward. Jungkook stared at him for a long time. Then, very slowly, he asked, Do you still love him? Taehyung's eyes flickered. No. I think I loved what he gave me. His attention. His warmth. When I was losing myself, he made me feel like I mattered. But it wasn't real. Not the way it was with you. Jungkook's breath hitched. What do you mean? I mean, Taehyung said, that we had something people don't talk about. Not romantic. Not sexual. But deeper. We were twin flames. And I smothered us trying to feel something else. Jungkook's throat tightened. You should have told me. I was afraid. So was I, Jungkook said. But I didn't burn the house down. I know. And with that, something shifted. The air didn't clear. The tension didn't vanish. But a thread of truth, fragile and thin, tied itself between them. Later that day, the manager gathered the group for a meeting in the main studio. The boys sat in their usual semicircle. Jimin wore sunglasses inside. Yoongi brought a notebook he didn't open. Hoseok sat with his knee bouncing nervously. Jeon kept checking his phone, pretending not to care. Namjoon stood at the front with a whiteboard that no one looked at. We have to talk about the comeback. The word sat in the room like a stone dropped into deep water. We've already delayed it twice, Namjoon said. We either commit now or we walk. The silence dragged. Do we even have a concept? Jeon asked. We did, Namjoon said. But it's not honest anymore. Then we start over, Jungkook said suddenly. Everyone turned. Jungkook continued. We write a new album. No filters. No rules. No pretending. About what really happened. You mean this? Yoongi asked, gesturing vaguely around the room. Jungkook nodded. Everything. The collapse. The betrayal. The healing. Jimin lowered his glasses. You want us to make art out of our trauma? We already do, Yoongi said. Might as well be intentional this time. I think it's suicide, Jeon muttered. The fans will eat us alive. They already are, Namjoon said. At least this way we control the story. Taehyung cleared his throat. What if it saves someone? Everyone turned again. He looked down. What if someone out there is going through this exact kind of hell, and our honesty makes them feel like they're not alone? Silence again. Then Hoseok said, I'm in. Yoongi followed. Same. Jungkook didn't need to say it. Taehyung simply nodded. Jeon sighed. Fine. But I want a full production budget. We're not making an indie cry album. Laughter, light and cautious, broke the tension for the first time in days. Jimin stood slowly. If I do this, I have to say things I've never said out loud. We all do, Namjoon said. I hurt people, Jimin said. I hurt you. He looked at Jungkook. I know, Jungkook said. But I loved you, Jimin whispered. I know, Jungkook replied. Do you still believe it? Jungkook looked down. I want to. That was all he could give. And somehow it was enough. The process began the next day. They booked a remote studio outside of Seoul. No media, no PR, just them. The first week was brutal. Yoongi cried recording his verse. Jimin left halfway through his first take. Jungkook broke down after laying a chorus vocal so raw the engineer had to leave the room. Taehyung wrote an entire bridge and deleted it. Jeon fought with Namjoon over a metaphor. Hoseok punched a wall. But they kept coming back. Day after day, night after night. One by one, the songs took form. The lead single was called Shatterproof, a ballad built on piano and silence. It started with Jungkook's whisper. You looked at me like I was glass / then shattered me with your hands. Jimin's verse followed. I thought I could love in silence / but silence screamed louder than I did. Taehyung came in third. We danced on ashes and called it warmth. When they listened to the final mix, no one spoke. Not because they didn't have words, but because the music had already said them. They didn't announce the album. They dropped it unexpectedly at midnight. No teasers. No promotions. No warning. Just a message from the band. This is not a comeback. This is a confession. The world exploded. Some fans cried. Some raged. Some walked away. But others, thousands, millions, clung to the music like it was oxygen. Jungkook received a message from a 17-year-old boy in Poland. You said everything I couldn't say when I watched the boy I love choose someone else. Jimin got a letter from a woman in Brazil. Thank you for being brave enough to admit you didn't know how to love right. Neither do I. Taehyung was sent a painting. His face fractured like glass, with flames in his eyes and flowers in his mouth. They sat together in the dorm after the release. No stylists, no cameras, no stage lights, just them. And for the first time in a long time, the silence didn't scream. It listened. You knew what this would do. Jimin's voice was low and shaking, not with fear but restraint. The late evening sunlight poured through the large studio windows, dyeing the air gold, casting long shadows across the floor where the group sat scattered after a brutally honest lyric session. The whiteboard in the corner still bore fragments of phrases too raw to be formed into lyrics, words crossed out and rewritten over and over again. Jungkook was pacing. His jaw worked tightly, the muscle flexing under his cheek. His hands curled into fists that hadn't yet been released from weeks of tension. Jimin stood, stepping into Jungkook's path, his bare feet quiet against the wooden floor. You knew what this would open. You knew that making an album like this meant reliving it. I didn't force you, Jungkook snapped. No one held a gun to your head, Jimin. No, Jimin said, eyes glinting. But you knew I'd follow you into the fire. And now what? Jungkook growled. You regret it? I regret everything that made this album necessary, Jimin shouted, voice cracking. I regret that we can't talk to each other without tearing open scars like we're still in the middle of it. I regret that I still... He stopped himself, eyes locking on Jungkook's. Say it, Jungkook dared. But Jimin didn't. He looked away, biting the inside of his cheek so hard it bled. Yoongi slammed his notebook shut from where he sat on the couch. We're not getting anywhere tonight. We've hit the wall again. Hoseok rubbed the bridge of his nose. Because we're not just making music. We're exorcising ghosts. Taehyung sat silently near the window, sketchpad open on his lap, but his pencil hadn't moved in 10 minutes. He didn't look up. Namjoon, who had been uncharacteristically quiet through the chaos, finally stood from the table and turned the whiteboard around, the scribbles disappearing like the end of an era. Enough for today. Everyone out. Breathe. Eat. Sleep. Something. Jungkook didn't move. Neither did Jimin. The others filed out slowly. Hoseok patted Jungkook's shoulder as he passed. Yoongi gave Jimin a fleeting, unreadable glance. Taehyung was last to leave, and for a moment, he paused at the doorway, as if he might say something. But then he closed the door behind him without a word. Now it was just the two of them. Jungkook stared at the wall, trying to unclench his fists, but they had forgotten how. Jimin stepped closer, slowly, cautiously, like one wrong movement would set off a landmine. I still remember, Jimin said quietly. The first time you looked at me like I was more than just part of the group. I never looked at you any other way, Jungkook murmured. You just didn't see it. Jimin blinked, fighting the sting in his eyes. I was afraid of ruining us, of wanting you too much, of what people would say. They're saying it now, Jungkook said. And I'm still here. Jimin moved even closer. I didn't choose him over you. Jungkook laughed bitterly. You kissed him, Jimin. That's not a mistake. That's a decision. I kissed him because I was drowning. Jimin cried out. You weren't talking to me. You were slipping away and I didn't know why. I was slipping because I was falling too deep, Jungkook whispered. Because I couldn't love you safely anymore. A beat passed. The sun dipped lower. Shadows lengthened. I thought, Jimin began, his voice barely a breath, that if I kissed him, it would kill what I felt for you, that it would end the tension, the longing, the pain of not knowing if you wanted me the same way. But it didn't, Jungkook said. No, Jimin admitted. It made it worse. He reached out, but Jungkook stepped back. Jimin's hand hovered in the air, then dropped. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he said. I don't deserve that. I'm asking you to believe me when I say that even then, even in that moment, I wanted you. Jungkook closed his eyes. He wanted to believe it, but belief had a cost now. Trust was a currency he no longer had enough of. I need to know, Jungkook said, opening his eyes slowly. Do you still love me? Jimin hesitated. His voice cracked as he said, I never stopped. Jungkook's breath caught. But, Jimin added, and that single word split the silence like thunder. I don't think you can love me back anymore. Not fully. Not with what I did. Jungkook didn't deny it. He couldn't. Later that night, the group gathered in the dorm kitchen. The atmosphere was tense but calm, like soldiers on leave after a brutal battle, resting but never truly at peace. I've been thinking, Yoongi said, stirring his tea. Maybe the final track shouldn't be an ending. What do you mean? Jean asked. Yoongi leaned back in his chair. I mean, maybe we don't wrap this up in a bow. Maybe we end it with a question. Namjoon nodded. A song that says we're still healing, that it's not resolved, that we don't know where we go from here. Hoseok tapped the table. Title. Taehyung spoke for the first time that night. Still here. The room fell silent. Jungkook looked at him across the table. Jimin's eyes flicked up from his mug. Taehyung nodded. Because we are. In spite of everything. We're still here. No one disagreed. They began writing that night. The final track was quiet. No beat drop. No crescendo. Just a soft acoustic guitar. A distant echo of a heartbeat. And 7 voices layered like pages of a journal. Jungkook's verse came last. I broke. I bled. I burned / but still. I stayed / because pain is proof I lived. When the final master was done, they didn't listen together. They each took the file and played it alone. Jimin listened to it on the rooftop. Taehyung listened to it lying flat on the floor of the empty rehearsal room. Jungkook stood by the river in Hanam, earbuds in, wind against his skin, tears running down his neck. None of them said a word for hours afterward. When they regrouped, it was not for a press conference, not a concert, not a photo shoot. It was for the release party. Just them. A private event in the training studio where they'd once practiced until dawn with bleeding feet and ramen breath and dreams too fragile to name out loud. They sat in a circle, lights off, projector casting the album art onto the wall. Namjoon lifted his glass. To what's broken. They clinked. Yoongi raised his. To what we'll never fully fix. More clinks. Jimin lifted his. To still being here. Jungkook met his eyes, then lifted his own. To the ruins. Taehyung's voice was the last. And to what we'll build from them. And this time the silence didn't ache. It held them. You can't perform that song. Jin's voice was firm, final. but beneath it, fear trembled like a wire stretched too tight. The dressing room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioner and the muted thump of bass from the rehearsal stage down the hall. Jungkook didn't answer right away. He sat on the counter, hoodie pulled over his head, fingers fiddling with the frayed string of his sweatpants. He looked at Jeon like someone who had already rehearsed this confrontation 100 times in his head. "Why not?" he asked, eyes never leaving the mirror. "Because you're not ready." Jungkook's lips twitched. "You mean because they're not ready?" Jeon exhaled sharply. "You think we don't see it? You haven't looked Jimin in the eye on stage once in 2 weeks. The fans notice. The staff notice. Everyone feels it." "Good," Jungkook said. "Let them feel it. That's the whole point of the album, isn't it? Honesty." "This isn't honesty," Jeon said. "It's bleeding in public." Jungkook stood now, slower than he usually would, as if carrying something heavier than his own weight. "Then let me bleed." "You're not the only one hurting," Jeon said, voice rising. "No," Jungkook said, his voice like ice. "But I'm the only one being told to sit down and shut up about it." The door opened then, and Yoongi stepped in, eyes flicking between them. He said nothing, but the temperature in the room changed. He was the gauge, the one everyone turned to when the emotions outpaced reason. "I heard," Yoongi said simply. "And?" Jungkook asked. Yoongi shrugged. "Let him sing it." Jeon turned. "You can't be serious." "I am," Yoongi interrupted. "This song is his blood. If he can stand on stage and pour it out without breaking, he's earned the right to." Jungkook's eyes met Yoongi's and something passed between them. Gratitude? Maybe? Or just the recognition of a shared wound. Jeon walked out without another word. That night, the stage was darker than usual. No bright LED backgrounds. No choreographed light show. Just a single spotlight and a mic stand in the middle of a black stage. The crowd, 18,000 strong, was almost too quiet. They knew what was coming. Jungkook walked out alone. He wore all black. No makeup. No earpiece. Just his voice and his breath. The first note rang out. Bare. Unpolished, not perfect. "If I had said the words before the silence, would you have stayed?" In the front row, someone sobbed audibly. In the wings, Jimin watched. Taehyung stood behind him. Neither of them moved. Jungkook's voice cracked on the second verse. Not dramatically. Just enough that those listening felt it like a bruise. "You kissed him / and I shattered quietly / and no one swept up the pieces." He wasn't singing at the audience. He was singing to the empty space between him and Jimin. Backstage, staff turned away, some too overwhelmed to watch. Namjoon stared at the monitor, hands clasped so tight his knuckles turned white. Yoongi sat on a folding chair, headphones off, eyes wet. When the song ended, there was no applause, just silence. Then the crowd erupted, not in cheers, but in tears, screams. 1,000 voices breaking all at once. Because Jungkook hadn't performed. He had confessed. Jimin didn't move for a long time after. His legs wouldn't cooperate. His heart had become a weight. "Go," Taehyung said. "I can't." "Yes, you can." Jimin stepped out onto the stage after Jungkook had already left. He picked up the mic. The crowd quieted again. "I didn't deserve that song," Jimin said. He waited for boos. There were none. "I didn't deserve him." He took a breath. "But I'm still here." That was all. The crowd clapped. Not wildly. Just enough. Later, in the green room, Jimin sat beside Jungkook. Neither looked at each other for a long time. "Thank you," Jimin whispered. "For what?" Jungkook asked. "For not hiding anymore." "I don't think I can ever hide again," Jungkook said. "It hurts too much." Jimin nodded slowly. "Then let's stop pretending." Jungkook looked at him then. Really looked. And for the first time in months, he didn't flinch. "Do you want to try again?" Jimin asked. Jungkook didn't answer. Instead, he leaned forward, touched Jimin's hand. Just once. "I want to heal," Jungkook said. "With or without you." Jimin nodded. "Then I'll wait." Outside the venue, The fans began singing the chorus of the song Jungkook had just performed. Softly at first, then louder, unified. Thousands of voices echoing pain and hope together. Back inside, Yoongi wrote in his notebook, "This isn't about redemption. This is about walking through the fire and choosing not to come out clean, but honest." The next morning, the group sat in the conference room of their agency. Executives, PR, management, the legal team, and them. The label wanted a press release to control the narrative. Jean said no. Yoongi said no. Namjoon put it bluntly, "Let them talk. We've already spoken louder than any article ever could." But the biggest shock came when Taehyung asked for a solo release. Not to compete, he said, but to respond. The execs hesitated until they heard the demo. Taehyung's song was called Second-Hand Flame. The chorus said, "I loved the way he looked at you. Even when you didn't see him, I was just the smoke, trying to be fire." The label gave their approval within hours. And when it dropped, the internet shattered again. Not from anger this time, from understanding. The fandom, once split and chaotic, began to breathe again. They didn't agree on everything. They didn't need to, but the honesty resonated deeper than scandal ever could. In the weeks that followed, something unexpected happened. Forgiveness became a conversation, not a demand, not a requirement, but a question. And every fan answered it in their own way. 1 month later, the group stood on stage together for the encore of a sold-out show. No tension, no distance, just 7 men standing side by side. Still flawed, still fragile, but whole in a new way. The final song of the night wasn't the hit single. It wasn't a fan favorite. It was still here. No choreography, no backing track, just their voices. And when the song ended, they turned to face each other and bowed to each other, not the crowd, not the label, to the wounds they survived, and to the love they never stopped carrying. "Do you think we're ever going to be the same?" Jungkook asked the question without looking up from his coffee, voice low and even, as though he already knew the answer and just needed someone to say it out loud. The dorm kitchen was silent except for the distant hum of the fridge and the ticking of the wall clock that had been 5 minutes fast for years but no one bothered to fix. Jimin stood at the counter, frozen mid-pour, the stream of water from the kettle slowing, splashing against the inside of a ceramic mug he didn't feel in his hand anymore. "No," Jimin said after a long pause. "I don't think we're meant to be." Jungkook looked up then, and their eyes met in the stillness. Something sharp passed between them, something bittersweet and warm at the same time. Recognition, maybe, or mourning. Jeon walked in on the tail end of the moment, his presence grounded, aware. He said nothing, just picked up a banana from the counter, peeled it, took a bite, and muttered around his mouthful. "If anyone starts crying before 10 a.m., I'm moving to Japan." "Too late," Jimin said quietly. "Then make room," Jeon replied. He sat at the table across from Jungkook, chewing slowly. "You know, people always talk about healing like it's a straight road. Clean, predictable. But they don't tell you that sometimes healing means standing in front of the person you love and knowing the most loving thing you can do is not go back." Jimin lowered his eyes. Jungkook took another sip of coffee, like he needed the bitterness to hold himself together. "You both survived each other," Jeon added. "That counts." Later that afternoon, during vocal rehearsals, the room was tense. Hoseok was unusually quiet, his typical brightness dimmed. Taehyung hadn't said a word since arriving. Yoongi sat on the floor, back against the wall, writing lyrics in a worn notebook with ink smudges on his thumb. Namjoon kept glancing toward the door like he was waiting for someone. Mid-session, a producer entered, flustered, holding a phone to his chest. "They want a statement," he said. "About the rumors." "What rumors?" Namjoon asked immediately. "Dispatch. Paparazzi. They say Jimin's been staying at Jungkook's place again. That they're back together." Silence. Taehyung's eyes lifted for the first time, sharp and unreadable. Jimin exhaled slowly. "Let them think what they want," Jungkook said. "No," Jimin said. We need to say something. Why? Jungkook turned to him. So they can twist it into whatever narrative gets the most clicks? I don't care about the press, Jimin said. I care about the people who are still healing from us. From everything we exposed. Namjoon stepped in. We'll draft a statement. Neutral. No confirmation. No denial. Just reaffirming our commitment to the music, the fans, and our personal growth. Taehyung stood then, abruptly. And what about me? Everyone turned to him. What about the fact that I still get hate every time my name trends? That I'm still the one they call a homewrecker or a snake in every comment section? You shouldn't read them, Hoseok offered gently. How do you not? Taehyung snapped. When they DM your little sister's friends. When they email your parents telling them they raised a traitor. His voice cracked on the last word, and no one had the breath to fill the silence that followed. Yoongi stood slowly. Then let's write that. Let's say that. The truth. They won't care about the truth, Taehyung said. No, Yoongi said. But they can't say we didn't give it. That night, they gathered in the studio and wrote the most unfiltered thing they had ever written. Not a song. A letter. Each member contributed one paragraph. Namjoon's was about leadership and the burden of watching his brothers fall apart and feeling too powerless to stop it. Jin's was about loyalty, what it meant when it meant standing with, not in front of. Hoseok's was about light, and what it cost him to shine through other people's shadows. Yoongi's was about silence, and how sometimes silence was the loudest scream. Taehyung's was about betrayal, not of others, but of himself, when he let fear replace clarity. Jimin's was an apology, not for the kiss, not for the fallout, but for being so afraid of love that he let it rot instead of bloom. And Jungkook's? Jungkook's was about time. You don't always heal where you hurt. Sometimes you heal far away, long after. Sometimes you don't go back. Sometimes you move forward with a limp. They posted it on Weverse, Twitter, Instagram, all at once. The internet exploded. Again. But something was different this time. There were still hateful comments, conspiracy threads, disappointment, but there was also understanding. Waves of it. Letters from fans who had left toxic relationships because the boys showed them what it looked like to admit pain. Fans who had come out to their families after seeing someone say, "I'm not okay, but I'm trying on stage." Messages that said, simply, "Thank you for telling the truth, even when it hurt." The label asked them if they wanted to do interviews to clarify the post. They declined. The letter was the final word, or so they thought, until 3 days later a video leaked. Unedited, unfiltered, raw phone footage from a rehearsal 2 weeks before. In it, Jimin and Jungkook were rehearsing the acoustic version of Still Here. There was no audience, just them. Jimin forgot a lyric. Jungkook corrected him. Then Jimin laughed. Really laughed. Full, unguarded. And Jungkook smiled, tired and soft. Then, under his breath, picked up by the mic. This is what it should have been. The video spread like wildfire. But instead of outrage, the world paused. The moment was so small, so human. No scandal, no shame. Just two people who had hurt each other and somehow still found ways to create something beautiful in the wreckage. And suddenly, everyone stopped demanding closure. The fans started asking for something else. A documentary. Not curated. Not stylized. Just the truth. The label resisted. The group insisted. And when filming began, it wasn't glamorous. It was raw. Fights caught on camera. Nights of no sleep. Tears in stairwells. But also laughter. Inside jokes. Late-night karaoke sessions. Unscripted apologies. Moments of silence between Taehyung and Jungkook that said more than words could. And eventually, the cameras caught something no one expected. Jimin sitting on the roof at sunrise. Jungkook beside him. Not touching. Not even talking. Just sitting. Until Jimin said, softly, "I think I finally understand what it means to love someone without needing them to be yours." Jungkook looked at him. "I think I needed to hear that," he said. And maybe that was it. Maybe that was enough. Maybe love, at its most honest, doesn't always end in happily ever afters. Sometimes it ends in peace. And peace is loud too. Quieter than applause. Softer than screaming fans. but louder than the silence that came before. And in that, they found something better than the past. They found their future. You're not wearing your in-ear. The voice came quietly just behind Jungkook, nearly drowned out by the sound of the crowd screaming his name. He was standing backstage, the arena lights dimmed and flickering, the low thrum of the pre-show bass humming through the floor beneath his boots. The others were in various states of preparation, Yoongi adjusting his mic, Jeon practicing his breath control, Hoseok bouncing on his heels like a coiled spring. But Jungkook stood still. He didn't turn around. "I know," he said, jaw tight. Jimin stepped into his periphery, his own in-ears dangling from his fingers like broken wings. "You okay?" Jungkook finally looked at him. His throat worked. "You ever stand in front of thousands of people and still feel like you're disappearing?" Jimin smiled faintly, the kind that hurts more than it heals. "Only every night?" They stood there, silence thick between them, punctuated only by the stage manager's final countdown in the background. "Why today?" Jimin asked. "Why does it feel heavier tonight?" Jungkook didn't answer immediately. Instead, he tilted his head toward the edge of the curtain just far enough to see the fans holding glowing banners, some of them painted with the words "Still Here" in massive gold Hangul letters. But one banner stood out. Handwritten, messy, desperate. "We forgive you. Please forgive yourselves." "I don't think I ever will," Jungkook whispered. And Jimin, perhaps for the first time, didn't try to stop him from saying it. He just nodded, because some wounds don't want ointment, they just want space. "Places," the stage manager called. The lights went out. The crowd exploded. The world tilted forward. They walked onto the stage together. 7 bodies. 1 breath. The show was unlike any other. The setlist had been redesigned to reflect not just their hits, but their journey. Each member had their own solo segment, each separated by monologues projected in subtitles above the stage, their voices playing like confessions to the dark. Yoongi spoke about silence. Jeon spoke about the burden of being okay for everyone else. Hoseok, for the first time publicly, talked about depression, not with drama but with detail. The kind of detail only someone who had clawed their way back from the brink could articulate. Taehyung's segment was the most surprising. Not because it was emotional, but because it wasn't. It was quiet. Reflective. He played a short video, him sitting in a dark room speaking directly to the camera. "Sometimes I think love and guilt are twins. You don't notice one until the other is staring back at you in the mirror." Then came Jimin's segment. He didn't sing. He just stood there. One spotlight. No background music. Just him and a microphone. "I never knew what love required," he said. "I thought it meant being perfect. Being safe. Being wanted. But love is none of those things. Love is ugly. Love is choosing someone even when they break you. And I broke him." The crowd was silent. Jimin's voice cracked. "I broke us. And I know that some of you will never forgive me for that. And maybe you shouldn't. But I'm still here. Not to ask for redemption. Just to say it out loud. I loved him. I still do. But sometimes loving someone means letting go of the idea that you deserve them." He walked off the stage before the lights even faded. Then it was Jungkook's turn. He walked to center stage, guitar in hand. No backup vocals. No effects. "I didn't plan on singing this," he said. A hush fell across the arena. "I wrote it the night I left the dorm. After I saw them kiss." A collective intake of breath. I know it's old. I know we've moved forward. But I also know I haven't sung this before. Not like this." He began to play. A melody so simple it sounded like a lullaby. His voice, stripped bare, was more powerful than any high note he'd ever hit. "You didn't take my heart. You just stopped guarding yours. And I stood outside your door, with flowers wilting in my fists, thinking I'd already lost you, when you were still calling me home." By the end of the song, Jungkook's voice shook. Not with sadness, but with the force of surviving. The crowd didn't scream. They wept. After the final song, the group stood side by side, looking out at the people who had stayed. Not for the perfection, but for the truth. And that's when it happened. The lights went out intentionally. But then one spotlight lit up the center of the stage. A stage tech handed Taehyung a mic. No one had planned this. Not even him. "I'm not good at these," he said, his voice echoing. The others looked at him, unsure. "I don't do unscripted moments. I don't do speeches. But there's something I never said. Not here. Not to you." He turned to Jungkook. "I'm sorry." Jungkook froze. Taehyung continued, "Not for loving Jimin. Not for being confused. But for not choosing you when you needed a brother more than I needed a secret." Jungkook's throat tightened. "I hurt you because I was afraid of who I was," Taehyung said. "But you never ran from the fire. You stood in it. And I let you burn alone." The crowd was holding its collective breath. Then, slowly, Jungkook stepped forward. He took the mic from Taehyung, stared at it for a long moment. Then, without speaking, he pulled Taehyung into a tight, crushing hug. Taehyung gripped him back, and the arena erupted. Jimin stepped forward. Jungkook met his eyes. No words were exchanged. None were needed. Jimin reached for his hand. Jungkook let him take it. They stood like that, three boys who had almost destroyed each other, standing in a line with the ones who pulled them back from the edge. Later, backstage, away from the lights, the makeup, the applause, they sat together on the floor of the dressing room. Namjoon looked at all of them. "I never thought we'd get here," he said. Yoongi laughed softly. "We're not at the end. We're just at a new beginning." Hoseok smiled. "Do you think we'll ever forget?" "No," Jean said. "But maybe we'll learn to stop bleeding from it." And Jimin, his head resting lightly against Jungkook's shoulder, whispered, "I think we already have." They didn't post that night. No photos. No tweets. Just silence. But this time it was not absence. It was rest. The next morning, fans woke up to a single post on the group's page. Black text on white background. "We don't promise perfection. We never will. But we promise truth. And we promise each other." And beneath it, in smaller font, "Still here? Not a comeback. Not a finale. Just love. Still learning how to live in the open. Even when it hurts. You're not wearing it." Jimin's voice was quiet, but it didn't lack power. He stood at the entrance of the makeup room, watching Jungkook through the mirror. Jungkook didn't move, just stared at his reflection, his jaw tight. The green ring, thin, matte, the one Jimin had given him in 2020 during that chaotic trip to Jeju, sat untouched on the table beside his cologne. It had been years, but now it felt heavier than ever, like a piece of time they had both outgrown but couldn't throw away. "It doesn't fit anymore," Jungkook replied, voice even. "It does," Jimin said, walking closer. "You just don't want it to." Jungkook finally turned, eyes sharp. "Why does it matter to you?" Jimin took a slow breath, stopping a few steps away. "Because we said we wouldn't run anymore. Not from each other. Not from the truth." That was before the documentary aired. The room fell still. That was the difference now. The documentary had dropped just 3 days earlier. Raw, uncut, and almost unbearable in its honesty. Fans had seen the cracks. The silences. The screaming match in the stairwell. The moment Jimin tried to touch Jungkook and he flinched away. They saw the pain. The reality. The humanity. And for the first time in their careers, no one looked away. But the aftermath was chaos. Fans were divided. Some praised them for their vulnerability. Others, less forgiving, called them irresponsible, selfish, immature. Rumors spun out of control. An ex-staff member posted on a private forum that Jimin and Taehyung had still been close even after the kiss. The fandom weaponized the documentary. People took sides. Headlines screamed betrayal. Some sponsors threatened to pull out. The label panicked. And the members? They were exhausted. "You think I haven't bled enough in front of them?" Jungkook snapped. "I didn't ask you to. You did," he said. "You all did. You asked me to open up. To strip down everything. To let them see the truth. And now that they've seen it, what am I supposed to do, Jimin? Pretend I still know how to breathe?" "I never wanted you to drown," Jimin said, his voice cracking. "But you didn't stop it either." Jungkook's words hung in the air like smoke. Thick. Clinging. Jimin blinked, swallowed, stepped back. "You're right." He said it too softly for victory, too sadly for defense. "You're right," he repeated. "I didn't stop it. I didn't stop any of it. Not when I should have. Not when it mattered." Jungkook didn't speak. Jimin took one more step toward the door. "But I'm still here. Even if you never look at me the same way again. Even if we're never anything but wreckage." "Why?" Jungkook asked. Jimin looked at him, really looked. "Because I don't know who I am without you." Jungkook clenched his jaw. "That's not fair." "I know," Jimin whispered. "But it's still true." Outside the door, Yoongi stood silently back against the wall, listening. He didn't want to. He hated eavesdropping. But lately, all of them had been walking into the same rooms hoping someone else would say what they were too tired to say themselves. That afternoon, the 7 of them met at the label boardroom again. The CEO, looking drawn and gray, sat with a thick folder of damage control strategies and brand partnership threats. Legal advisors. PR reps. A few staff members from HYBE trying not to make eye contact. "I'm going to be direct," the CEO said. "This documentary was a risk. A risk that now has consequences. We need to respond publicly." Namjoon leaned forward. "We did respond. That was the point." "You responded emotionally," the CEO snapped. "Not strategically. And now there's a fire and everyone expects us to explain why it happened." "You want a press release?" Jeon asked, folding his arms. Another sanitized half-truth so people can sleep better? I want stability, the CEO said. Well, we're not stable, Yoongi said calmly. That's the problem. The room froze. Taehyung leaned forward, voice low. You want to sell the idea that we're a perfect brand. But we stopped being a brand when we told the truth. Now we're just people. And people don't fit in press templates, Hoseok added. The CEO's lips pressed into a thin line. Look, Namjoon said, his tone shifting. We can't go backward. We can't undo what we showed. So maybe the question isn't how to spin it, but what we do next. What do you propose? A live panel, Jimin said suddenly. Everyone turned to him. Jimin's hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. Live. No filters. No script. Us. Sitting down. Talking to the fans directly. Taking questions. Owning it. Not as a PR move. Not as an apology tour. But as closure. No one's done that before, the CEO said, almost scoffing. Exactly, Jungkook said, entering the conversation for the first time. A beat. Then Namjoon turned to the room. All in favor? One by one, hands raised. Even Jeon. Especially Taehyung. That night, the announcement dropped. We're not hiding. Join us. The live stream was scheduled for Saturday. 1 hour. No moderator. No script. Just 7 mics. 1 camera. And an entire world watching. When the day came, they sat in a circle. Not behind a table. Not on stage. But on the floor of their practice studio. In sweats. Hoodies. Makeup free. Eyes tired but honest. The chat was already bursting. Millions watching. Then the stream began. Namjoon opened it. This is the most afraid I've ever been in my life, he admitted. Yoongi nodded. Same. Ask us anything, Jeon said. But if you're expecting lies, log off now. The questions came fast. Some predictable. Some not. Did Jimin cheat? No, Jimin said. But I betrayed him in a different way. Do you still love each other? Yes, Jungkook said. But love doesn't erase hurt. Why didn't you go public earlier? Because we were protecting an image that no longer protected us, Taehyung said. Did you think about disbanding? Yes, Namjoon, Jeon, and Hoseok said in unison. Will you make another album? Yes, Yoongi said. But it'll sound different. Do you forgive each other? No, Jimin said, looking at Jungkook. Not fully. Not yet. Jungkook looked back. But we're trying. The final question hit harder than expected. Are you still BTS? The room fell quiet. Namjoon looked around the circle. Then he smiled. No. He let that sit. Not the BTS you thought we were. Not the invincible one. Not the perfect one. We're not that anymore. Maybe we never were. But we're something else now, Jungkook added. We're still a family, Jeon said. Still artists, Yoongi said. Still here, Taehyung whispered. And the live stream ended. No tears. No curtain call. Just truth. And for once it was enough. The next morning, the world didn't explode. It slowed. The hate didn't vanish, but it softened. Because people saw what they weren't supposed to see. And they didn't look away. And maybe healing finally wasn't quiet. It was loud. Messy. Honest. And beautiful. Don't tell me this is just about music. Yoongi's voice sliced through the room like a scalpel. His eyes were tired, darker than usual, but blazing with a focus that shook the air. They were in Studio B, the old one. The one they had trained in back when nobody cared who they were, before the world had learned their names and turned them into gods and targets. The faded wooden floors still carried the scuff marks from their first routines. The mirrors were cracked in the corners. It was cold. Too quiet. Namjoon had been talking, trying to outline the vision for their next chapter, another album, another tour, another documentary. But something about the way he used the word healing made Yoongi snap. I'm serious, Yoongi continued. If this is just another rebranding of our pain, I'm out. I didn't bleed for optics. Jeon looked up from where he sat cross-legged by the amp. No one did. I think that's the problem, Yoongi said. The world thinks we did. Jungkook stood by the window, jaw clenched. They can think what they want. They always do. But what do you think? Yoongi asked, turning to him. Jungkook didn't answer right away. His reflection in the window was warped by a rain-speckled pane, half-shadowed, blurred. He looked older these days. Not in his face, but in the way he held silence like a blade, sharp and poised. I think, he said finally, that if we keep moving without stopping to live, we're just replacing one kind of lie with another. The room quieted. Hoseok let out a long breath. So what are we saying? That we take a break? No, Taehyung said from the corner, his voice distant but steady. We stop pretending we know what we're doing. Jimin looked at him. He hadn't spoken since they'd walked in. You're the one who always pretended the most, Jimin said softly. Taehyung's head turned, his expression unreadable. And I'm done. Aren't you? Jimin didn't answer. Namjoon sat down slowly, folding his hands together. What if we don't release anything this year? That got everyone's attention. Wait, Jean said. What? Namjoon leaned forward, eyes clear, voice calm. What if we stop performing? Stop recording. Stop producing ourselves for once. Just exist. And what, go to the countryside and raise chickens? Hoseok said, half laughing, half nervous. Maybe, Namjoon said. Maybe we separate. Maybe we travel. Maybe we go write songs we never intend to release. Maybe we learn who we are outside of each other. Yoongi was nodding before Namjoon even finished. Yes. Taehyung looked down at his hands. Do we even know how to do that? No, Jungkook said. But I think we should try. They didn't come to a decision that day. But the seed was planted. 2 days later, Namjoon disappeared to Kyoto. Yoongi booked a solo cabin in Jeonju with a piano and no phone signal. Jean returned to his family in Gwacheon. Hoseok signed up for a contemporary dance retreat in Paris. Taehyung went silent on social media and was last seen sketching alone on a pier in Busan. Jimin? He disappeared without saying a word. Jungkook moved into a small apartment across the river. The group didn't break up. There was no press release. No disbandment. Just space. Time. Breath. And for the first time in a decade, they let the world move without them. For months, there was nothing. No music. No fan events. No airport photos. The industry whispered that they had imploded. That the documentary was their suicide note. That Jimin and Jungkook had destroyed the core. But the fans, those who stayed, understood. They didn't demand content. They waited. They let the silence bloom. Until, one night, almost 9 months later, a soft guitar melody appeared on a private SoundCloud account. The account had no name. Just a blank profile picture. And the title of the song. If You're Still Listening. The voice was unmistakable. It was Jungkook. The lyrics were raw, spoken like diary entries. I hated you. For not fighting for me. But I hated me more. For waiting in a war. You didn't know I started. The song ended not with a chorus. But a voicemail. Jimin's voice. Not edited. Not produced. Just real. You don't have to forgive me. But I forgive you. And I forgive me too. The fandom collapsed. They weren't sure if it was a reunion or a goodbye. Until a week later, another file was uploaded. This time, the artist's name was visible. 7. No BTS. Just 7. The track was called One Day Maybe. It featured all their voices. Blended, imperfect, home-recorded, barely mastered. The lyrics were soft, hopeful, messy, but honest. And that's when the announcement dropped. Not from the label. Not from PR. But from Jungkook's Instagram. A handwritten note. We're not coming back. We're not going forward. We're just here. Still. Together. When we're ready, we'll sing again. Until then, keep listening. The picture underneath the note? A group photo. No stylists. No stage lights. Just 7 boys at a beach bonfire. Smiling. And behind them, the night sky stretched open. Still. Wide. And unfinished. The sun was already high above the Han River when Jungkook walked into the cafe. It was small, tucked between an old vinyl shop and a half-forgotten bookstore. The kind of place without a name on the door, just a wind chime that tinkled when you entered. It smelled of roasted beans and nostalgia, soft jazz humming through an old speaker. There were only 2 other people inside, a barista with wire-rimmed glasses and a man sitting in the corner, back to the door, baseball cap pulled low. Taehyung. Jungkook stopped by the counter. Long black. No sugar. The barista didn't speak, just nodded, recognizing the face but choosing, wisely, not to say anything. Jungkook didn't wear disguises anymore. What would be the point? He took the coffee to the corner and sat across from Taehyung without asking. Taehyung didn't lift his head. He just said, you came. Jungkook sipped his coffee, wincing slightly at the bitterness. Didn't say I would. But you did, Taehyung said, finally looking up. His face was thinner than the last time they'd seen each other. His eyes held the weight of months of silence and something else. Not regret. Not anymore. Something quieter. Acceptance, maybe? Or the outline of peace. Jungkook placed his cup on the table. You said it was important. It is. A long pause. The jazz continued. Jungkook watched him. So talk. Taehyung took a breath. I'm leaving Korea. That hit harder than Jungkook expected. He tried to keep his face still, but something in his shoulders flinched. For how long? I don't know, Taehyung said. A year. Maybe 2. Jungkook's voice was careful. Is this about us? No, Taehyung said. And yes. It's about everything. The band. The noise. The ache in my chest every time I try to create something and hear all of you in it. Jungkook swallowed hard. So you're running. Taehyung didn't argue. Maybe. But I'm also choosing myself. For the first time in a decade. There was no accusation in his tone. No bitterness. Just the cold, clear honesty of someone finally stepping out of a story he didn't write. Will you tell the others? Jungkook asked. I told Jimin, Taehyung said. And Namjoon. Why me? Because I never said goodbye, Taehyung said. Not really. Not after that night. The kiss. The silence. The chaos. The years that followed. Jungkook looked down. His coffee had gone cold. You know what I hated most? Jungkook said. What? That it was you. Taehyung nodded. I hated that too. Because if it had been anyone else I think I could have forgiven him sooner, Jungkook whispered. But you were the only one I never expected to betray me. Taehyung's eyes glistened. He didn't blink them away. I betrayed myself too, you know, he said. I lost more than I gained. Jungkook nodded. Silence settled again. Not awkward. Just tired. You'll come back? Jungkook asked finally. Taehyung smiled, the first real one since Jungkook had sat down. When I'm not haunted by us anymore. Jungkook offered a faint smile back. Good luck with that. They laughed quietly. It felt strange. Familiar. Human. Then Jungkook stood. They didn't hug. Didn't shake hands. Just looked at each other, long and hard, and walked away in opposite directions. 3 months later, Jeon gathered everyone in a private suite in Jeju. Everyone except Taehyung. The room was warm with natural light, wood-paneled walls, and the scent of sea air. Jimin curled on the couch under a gray blanket. Yoongi sprawled near the patio with a portable keyboard on his lap. Hoseok brewed tea without asking anyone what they wanted. Namjoon stared out the window like he was listening for something none of them could hear. I miss him, Jimin said. Nobody had to ask who. Yoongi didn't look up. He's doing what he needs. Hoseok poured green tea into mismatched mugs. Still hurts. Jungkook sat on the floor beside Jimin, arms resting on his knees. I saw him before he left. That made everyone pause. Jeon raised an eyebrow. And? He was at peace, Jungkook said. But not happy. Silence again. Namjoon finally spoke. I got a call. From the label. That got everyone's attention. They want us back. Groans. Eye rolls. A faint fuck no from Yoongi. Namjoon held up a hand. Not for a tour. Not for an album. They want a 10-year anniversary special. One night. One stage. No cameras. Just fans. Jimin's voice was barely audible. Just us. Namjoon nodded. One night. We choose the songs. We choose the venue. They'll fund it but stay out of it. Jungkook rubbed his face. What's the catch? They want us to be okay. Laughter from everyone, tired and a little cracked. Jeon smirked. Define okay. Namjoon grinned. Alive and not punching each other. Yoongi stretched. That might be too ambitious. But no one said no. Not really. The planning began slowly. A setlist born from debates and half-fights and late-night voice messages. They chose 7 songs. 1 each. No choreography. No scripts. Just music. Jungkook chose Still Here. Jimin chose a new song. One no one had heard. Yoongi chose Seesaw but a stripped version. Jeon picked a ballad no one ever performed because it was too raw back then. Namjoon chose a poem. Hoseok chose Silence. A full minute of it. They agreed. And Taehyung? He sent a voice recording. It was a whisper. If you sing without me, I'll haunt the fuck out of you. They laughed for 10 full minutes. And then a month before the show he came back. Unannounced. Unshaved. Taller, somehow. Worn, but light. Jimin opened the door to find him holding a plant. For the dorm, Taehyung said. Jimin started crying. They didn't rehearse traditionally. Just sat in circles, letting the chords come. On the night of the show, the venue was quiet. No cameras. Phones off. Just 7 chairs, 1 stage, and a sea of faces who remembered every version of them. The lights dimmed. Jungkook walked out first. Then Yoongi. Then Jeon. Hoseok. Namjoon. Jimin. And finally Taehyung. They sat in a line. No one spoke. Then Yoongi began to play. And they sang. Not like idols. Not like broken boys. But like men who had burned and buried and begun again. At the end, Namjoon stepped forward. Thank you, he said. For waiting. Then he smiled. And just so you know, we never left. We just needed to remember who we were without the noise. Jimin took Jungkook's hand. No one said anything about it. The crowd stood in silence. And for the first time, it wasn't painful. It was holy. They left the stage one by one. Except for Jungkook. He stood alone for a long moment, then whispered into the mic. We're still learning how to be. But we are. We are. And the lights went out. But the music didn't stop. Not this time. Not ever.